Hello. We're talking about the fact that we live in the kingdom of this world, but we are citizens of the kingdom of heaven, and that the values of these two kingdoms often clash. We read, for example, in 1 John 2:15, "Do not love this world, nor the things it offers you, for when you love the world, you do not have the love of the Father in you." And we as Christians are so easily influenced by the values of this world, and we need to recognize what they are in contrast to the values of the kingdom of heaven. Now, another area where these values clash is when it comes to moral ethics. In the kingdom of this world, the citizens decide for themselves what is right and what is wrong. We had a good example of that in the book of Judges, where we read in Judges 17 verse 6, "In those days Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit." And you know, this was at the heart of the first temptation. When Satan tempted Eve, he was saying, "Don't let God decide for you. You decide. You will know what is right and what is wrong, and you can choose." And so often we hear people say, when they talk about some sinful behavior, they say, "Well, there's nothing wrong with it as long as nobody gets hurt." But there will always be people who get hurt. Ernest Hemingway, that very well-known author, it was said of him that he had broken every one of God's commands and that he had got away with it. And that article was published in a magazine in 1955. And you know, 10 years later, almost to the day, Ernest Hemingway committed suicide because he didn't get away with it. Sin always hurts. And when we decide for ourselves what is right and wrong, we are going to get hurt. You see, the world today says we decide what is right and wrong when it comes to things like sexual behavior outside of marriage, abortion, exploiting the weak, divorce, dishonesty, bribery, you name it. And these things then all become acceptable. And if we as Christians say anything about it, as I did to somebody the other day about his behavior, his comment was that I'm being judgmental. Who are you to tell me what to do? Well, that is the value of the kingdom of this world. But in the kingdom of heaven, the citizens let God decide what is right and what is wrong. For example, in Acts 5 verse 29, Peter and the apostles replied to the Sanhedrin, "We must obey God rather than human beings." And the excuse that everybody does it does not apply to citizens of the kingdom of heaven. And this may range from illicit sexual relations to telling white lies to using your cell phone while driving. Exodus 23 verse 2 says this, "Do not follow the crowd in doing wrong." Another area where we clash in values is when it comes to recognition. You see, in the kingdom of this world, the citizens seek the approval of men. For example, in Matthew 23 verse 5, Jesus spoke of the Pharisees and said, "Everything they do is done for people to see. They love the place of honor at banquets and the most important seats in the synagogues. They love to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and to be called rabbi by others." And so much of our lives is governed by the fear of what other people might think of us. So much of our lives is governed to try and impress others. In John 12 verse 43, we read that there were some Pharisees who believed in Jesus, but they wouldn't say so publicly, and I quote, "because they loved human praise rather than praise from God." Isn't that sad? I mean, just look at the society pages of the newspapers and magazines. I mean, to be seen in the right circles, that's the most important thing in life. To be able to name drop about who you know. But you know, in the kingdom of heaven, the citizens seek the approval of their Lord. In Galatians 1 verse 10, Paul says these words, "If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ." And in 1 Corinthians 4:3, Paul said he doesn't care how others judge him. He doesn't even judge himself. He says, "I leave it to the Lord, but I do not want to be a people pleaser." And yet we often see that these values are evidenced even among Christians. We allow our actions to be governed by the fear of what others might think of us. For example, we may turn down requests to carry out some kind of ministry for fear that we might just not do it perfectly. Maybe we're too scared that during this lockdown to just pick up the phone and phone people who might be lonely and just to hear how they're doing because we're scared we might make fools of ourselves. No. As long as the Lord approves, it's all that matters. Shall we pray? Dear Lord, forgive us for allowing our behavior to be governed by what people might think of us. Father, make our priorities such that we will seek your approval, that we will seek your recognition, and Lord, that we will allow you to determine what is right and wrong. We ask it for your name's sake. Amen.